All right, let's get into it. Today, we're going to be diving deep into a sports prediction model with a name that honestly sounds like it came straight out of a science lab, KEI-ATPase 3.0. Yeah, you heard that right. We're going to try and decode this digital oracle and see if it can really predict the future of football. And really, that brings us to the biggest question of all, doesn't it? I mean, we all love football for its passion, the drama, that incredible, unpredictability. So can a machine, with all its cold, hard data and complex algorithms, really outsmart the beautiful game? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Okay, so here's our game plan for today. First, we'll meet this AI oracle. Then we'll check out its predictions for the Africa Cup of Nations. After that, we're going to decode the model's strange language, look at its strategies, and finally, we'll get into that big debate, data versus destiny. Right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the AI oracle. So what on earth is KEI-ATPase 3.0? Let's forget that crazy name for just a moment and focus on what it actually does. So at its core, this thing is way more than just a stats machine crunching numbers on goals and possession. No, it's a lot more sophisticated than that. It analyzes games using its own special data-driven vocabulary. It's almost like it's a machine that invented its own language just to talk about football. Pretty wild, right? Okay, so how good is this AI really? Let's put it to the test. We're going to look at its predictions for 3 big matches from the Africa Cup of Nations, set for a hypothetical December 22nd, 2025. And here we go. This is the output. So it's predicting a win for Mali, a draw between South Africa and Angola, and a win for Egypt. But look at that reasoning column. That's where things get really interesting. Superior structural integrity, metabolic equilibrium, defensive decay rate. What in the world does any of that mean? Don't worry, we're about to break it all down. But before we get into translating that jargon, just take a look at these confidence scores. The model is most certain about Egypt winning, with a pretty high 88% confidence. Mali isn't far behind, at 82%. But that draw for South Africa versus Angola, well, it's a bit less sure about that one, at 76%. And this difference is absolutely crucial because it changes how the model thinks about strategy. All right, let's get our translator hats on. It's time to decode this model and translate that crazy jargon. We're going to figure out the logic behind each of these predictions one by one. So let's start with the model's absolute top pick, the one it's most confident about, Egypt beating Zimbabwe. And according to the AI, the key to this whole prediction is a single phrase, defensive decay rate. So what is defensive decay rate? Well, it's not about how good a defense is in the first 5 minutes. It's about how quickly that defense cracks and crumbles when it's under constant pressure. The model's data is basically saying that Zimbabwe's defense has a really high decay rate. It's likely to just fall apart as the game goes on. And that's why the model is so sure Egypt is going to win. Okay, moving on to our second match, Mali versus Zambia. For this one, the model says the deciding factor is something it calls structural integrity. I actually love this term. Think of structural integrity like the steel frame of a skyscraper. It's all about how well a team holds its tactical shape, especially during those chaotic moments when they're switching from defense to attack and back again. The model looked at the data and said, yep, Mali is way better at keeping their formation together during that chaos, and that's what gives them the edge over Zambia. And that brings us to our final case study, that predicted draw between South Africa and Angola. Now this one is different. It's not about one team being stronger, it's about the two teams being almost too similar. Yeah, metabolic equilibrium. It sounds like something out of a biology textbook, right? But the idea is actually pretty simple. It's what happens when two teams basically just cancel each other out. Their tactics are similar, their energy output is similar, everything is so evenly matched that neither side can get a real foothold. The model sees this total tactical stalemate and goes, well, the most likely outcome here is a draw. Okay, so the model makes these predictions, which is cool, but it doesn't just stop there. It actually takes its own analysis and turns it into a clear, actionable strategy. It goes from analysis to action. And to do that, it uses another component with a, you guessed it, super scientific name, the Legacy engine. You can think of this engine as the team strategist. Its whole job is to take those predictions and confidence scores and sort them into a hierarchy, from the safest bets all the way down to the riskier plays. And this is what that strategy looks like. The Legacy engine looks at the high-confidence predictions, the wins for Egypt and Mali, and it calls them ultra bankers. These are the solid, reliable ones. But that lower confidence draw between South Africa and Angola, that gets a different label, a value play. So it breaks down into this really simple two-step strategy. First, you identify your ultra bankers. These are the slam dunks, the plays the model is really, really sure about. And then you isolate the value play. This one's more of a calculated risk, sure, but it's got potential for a bigger upside exactly because it's not the most obvious choice. Okay, for our last section, let's zoom out a bit and talk about the big picture. We've seen the data, we've translated the jargon, we've looked at the strategy. But what about the human element? This is where we talk about data versus destiny. You know, it's maybe the most fascinating part of this whole thing. The model itself admits it has blind spots. It literally lists its own risk factors. It talks about things like a single individual error completely changing a game, or a team hitting a high motivational structural peak. I mean, think about that. Even the machine knows it has to account for things like a moment of human error or a sudden burst of inspiration. And this slide just sums it all up perfectly. On one side, you've got the model's world. It's all clinical and analytical, with terms like structural integrity and decay rates. But on the other side, well, that's the football world we all know and love. A lucky deflection, a breathtaking moment of magic from one player, a simple human error. It's two completely different languages describing the very same game.
So, I'll leave you with this question to chew on. As data gets smarter and these models get more and more powerful, is sport just going to become predictable? Are we going to solve football? Or will the human element, that beautiful, chaotic, unpredictable part of it all, always have the final say? Something to think about.